What should be done with Obamacare?
The main thing that we need to be doing is absolutely repealing it and not funding it. But in order to have a
What would you
strong
put in its
position,
place?
tort reform would be great. State regulations where you can't sell insurance across state lines would be excellent. And if we could do
You can or can't?
So that you
okay.
can sell across state lines. If we're able to do that and really open up the marketplace and increase competition, premiums will go down on their own. And we could certainly have a lot less people uninsured, and not because we're buying them insurance or subsidizing them, but because now they can afford it on their own. That's real power to the consumer instead of to the politician. And if we tell that to the American people, I'm quite sure that they'll be on our side with that.
What about the people that couldn't afford insurance?
The people who can't afford insurance, I can understand there always being kind of a safety net, but right now it's more of a hammock. It's where people are really expecting that they have a right to health care, like what the Democrat Party is saying to them. So we can certainly have some sort of a safety net, but as the Founding Fathers had it, it was at the state level. And that's really where I believe that welfare should take place, is more at the state level. And for those with permanent conditions and so forth, that can be certainly addressed as a separate issue, and that's something that people are working on.
What do you think the chances are that it'll be repealed if the Republicans take over?
If the Republicans take the Senate, there's still not much of a chance, because there's no way that we can override a veto for Obamacare, for the president. But if we win in 2016, we can certainly get it repealed. But that's going to take a lot of work. It's not too difficult in a midterm because they don't have a celebrity running at the front of their party. But when they do, a lot of uninformed voters show up just because they're so attached to the image. And that's going to be a major hurdle. So we've got to get people in office this election who are able to message our policies and so forth to the American people effectively.
Who would be a good presidential candidate for the Republicans?
That's a good question. I really like Marco Rubio quite a bit. I think that I'm not such a fan of seeing people like Jeb Bush or Chris Christie being running, although Chris Christie is somebody who is vocal and is out there talking about our ideas, and most of what he believes is, I think, what we are in line with. But I do see that Marco Rubio is much stronger in terms of a presidential candidate who would be liked.
In what way is he stronger?
I think he's stronger because he can just really, number one, he's very conservative. He doesn't back down because of public pressures. And I start to see a little bit of that possibly in Chris Christie. But with Marco Rubio, he's been very strong all the way through and is able to talk to people in a very simple manner. Everybody can understand what he says. He's not using numbers from the 1960s. He's talking about families right now and the challenges that small businesses face. And I think that's a wonderful thing to run on.
Well, let's talk about Vaughn Hatton.
Sure.
You know him, of course. What makes you a better candidate than the others? There's 7 people running for this seat, 4 Republicans, an independent,
Right.
and a Democrat, congressional party person.
Mm-hmm.
What makes Vaughn Hatton the best choice?
Sure. One of the things is certainly that I'm in line with what Utah's 2nd District believes. I think that Representative Stewart, when you talk to many of the constituents, they are agreeing with his voting record for the most part, and there might be 1 or 2 things that I differ on, but very minute details. But the main thing that he hasn't been doing is speaking to the American people and representing his ideas, our ideas to the American people. So he can come back here and, just like most candidates, and I'm not bashing on him too much because this is the norm, not the exception, but people will stay silent when they're in Washington. Let the Democrats get away with just about anything. When President Obama says, I didn't know the website wasn't ready for launch. I didn't know the NSA was spying on our allies. I didn't know that the IRS was targeting my political opponents. We just kind of stay silent and just hope that the American people will figure out that they're lying to them, instead of going out there and saying that he's not telling the truth. And that's one thing that we're missing. And that's something that, having been in the media and been in communicating with the average voters, is something that I understand very well, and something that very few Republicans really can do. They can come back and preach to the choir here and say, you know, the federal government is spending our way into oblivion. You know, the BLM is...
We're already in oblivion. Let's not spend our way into.
Right, exactly, exactly. And, you know, we can get mad at the BLM and so forth, but all of us here understand that. We're not voting for President Obama. We're not voting for Harry Reid and the Democrats. So instead of just talking to the people here in Utah, we need to be bringing our message beyond the borders of Utah to those who really need to hear it and are voting in a
You mentioned you
wrong
were
way.
experienced in media and so forth. What do you do for a living?
Sure. I used to work in the media. I stopped during the campaign and so forth and just focused on the campaign and even schooling, actually. Right now I'm still in school for accounting and so forth. But in the media, what I did was research. I was a producer, so what I did was get material for the show and line up
What shows did you
interviews.
do?
For Rod Arquette, I was up with the station on KNRS, the station with Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck, and Rod Arquette. I was Rod Arquette's producer for quite a while. And so in researching, I also did the entire program. So in terms of microphones, commercials, music and so forth, and facilitating the interviews, not just lining them up, but making sure that they were on air and controlling their microphones and so forth.
So you did the whole thing, except did you do on-air work?
I didn't do very much on-air work at all. There was some, but very, very little. It was mostly just the background technical stuff and the research behind it for the show.
Let's talk about some of the specific things. Public lands.
Sure. Public lands. This is a big deal, of course, here in Utah, where 2/3 of our lands are owned by the federal government, and there's no reason for it. We ought to be telling the American people that nobody cares about Utah's lands more than the people of Utah. And same with all of the other states. We don't ravage our lands. In fact, here in Utah's 2nd District, I remember Representative Stewart saying that about 40% of the economy here is tourism. We wouldn't be destroying our lands if we had control of it. We would certainly be taking care of it, and we could also experience the economic boom of energy and being able to drill for our own oil here, which we have an enormous amount of. And I think that the American people are resistant to the drilling argument because they've bought into this global warming thing that everybody is taught in school and nowadays and so forth.
Is it true?
Well, as somebody who is a very big person in terms of, well, not big person in terms of science, but I'm a science enthusiast. I love looking at science and technology and so forth. And when I speak with a lot of scientists, particularly astronomers, they tell me that global warming is happening, but it's not this man-made global warming that the Democrat Party is making it out to be. However, we don't need to win that argument right now. We can just sidestep it. We can just tell the American people all the products that we use with oil, the plastic that's in this, that this water bottle is made out of, the paint that we use all around us, adhesives. There are so many different things that are used for oil, plasma TVs, computer parts, so many different things that we're not pumping oil from the ground into the sky for pollution. Even if all cars ran on an alternative energy, we would still need to be drilling for oil. And I think if we tell the American people like that, then they would be less resistant to the idea of drilling for our own oil, because we use it every day.
What if I told you that there's a patent on recovering oil from shale that would convert all coal-burning power plants to totally environmentally safe? What would you say to that?
I believe I've heard of one patent, maybe this is another technology that you're referring to, but I think that's an interesting thing to look into. But I think also nuclear energy would be a wonderful thing to develop. Everything that comes out of those smokestacks is pure water vapor. There's nothing in terms of pollution and CO2 emissions, and yet it's the party of global warming, the Democrat Party, that are opposed to these same types of technologies that we're talking about. So we really need to talk to the American people about that and let them know that they're really just like when